Good afternoon, class. Welcome to Hrm TV. This is the station that you watch and also run. I'm your course instructor, Mr. Hrm Group, taking you through human resource management. And today's topic is group selection. Welcome. Now, before we move to the group selection, it's important that you note the other technique that is used in selection, that is recruitment and selection. And it forms the last stage of the selection process, which is called referencing, or seeking the views of the references. This is given by the referees, and these are the people who have the prior knowledge about a candidate. Examples of referees: they can be spiritual leaders, they can also be academic tutors or lecturers, they can also be the immediate supervisors or the managers within an organization. Therefore, during the selection process, the recruiter will access or will contact the referees. The referees will give the information pertaining to the candidate. This one can be done orally, or it can be through a written method, etc. The only problem with references, and it is a hindrance as a way of seeking more information about a candidate, is that it can be sometimes manipulated by the candidate and therefore not give the correct picture about the candidate. So we normally say that references are also used as a selection method, and occasionally, or in most occasions, unsatisfactory references may affect decisions to appoint an individual or candidate. So today we are just going to move on straight to the last topic, and the recruitment and selection. Remember, the recruitment and selection, this is the third function of human resource management. And before we move on to the next function of human resource planning, human resource management, we are going to look at the group selection. Group selection basically is a situation whereby the interview is done as a group as opposed to individual interviewee coming in for an interview. We have various techniques that are used in group selection methods. We shall look at them one by one. Therefore, if you asked about the meaning of group selection, you say that there is a situation whereby 3 or more interviewees are interviewed at the same time, as opposed to individual or face-to-face or one-on-one interview of an individual. We have various techniques that are used under group selection. Yes, we say that under group selection methods, the candidates are given a topic. In this case, the candidates are given a topic or a role play exercise and are invited to discuss the topic or a role play in a group. A role play is an artificial setup where a problem is brought forth and the interviewees have to come up with a solution. It is not a real time, it is not real in nature, it is artificial setup whereby they are confronted with a problem and they are supposed to come up or to brainstorm various solutions to those problems. So during a role play, or this artificial setup, or a discussion, the observer, who is basically the recruiter, will be looking for specific attributes and award each mark to each candidate. This, of course, means that you may need 4 or more candidates to make this a meaningful exercise, and enough people to mark the candidates properly. Therefore, the evaluator will evaluate each candidate and award marks. The evaluator may be more than one. Therefore, they are going to award each participant marks, and then they come up with a weighted average on the same. The first technique that is mostly used under the group selection is referred as the assessment center. It is called the assessment center. And an assessment center, you say that it is used as the final, it is used as the final stage of the selection process. An assessment center is used as the final stage of the selection process for high value jobs. Therefore, what you are supposed to note about the first thing you are supposed to note about an assessment center is that they are used for high value jobs, or once you are procuring top managers or people who are high within the hierarchy in an organization. An assessment center consists of a series of tests. There are various tests, interviews, or group situations over a period of 2 days, involving a small number of candidates, typically 6 to 8 candidates. Therefore, the setup is about 6 to 8 candidates. It can go for a period of 2 days, and it consists of various tests. We have various tests that are conducted. We have various interviews that are conducted, and also group situations. Group situations, there's case studies that are brought forth. And the assessment center, we say that assessment methods are based on the principle of multiple testing processes. Therefore, you use various tests to test these candidates. This test can be the aptitude test, the personality test, all those tests. This may include the ability and the aptitude testing, group exercises, intra exercises. We are going to look at what is intra exercises as another technique of group selection. Also, we have presentations and as well as personality profiling. Personality, basically, this is the character trait that is portrayed by these candidates. And these character traits are inferred through their behavior, their attitudes towards certain topics such as religion, political parties, a certain group, maybe a minority group, etc. He said that the important issue for all testing is to ensure that there is clarity about what is to be tested and that the test is appropriate. An assessment center should be devised to specifically examine important aspects of the job and measure how well individuals are likely to perform in those jobs. Next, we say that an assessment center should be fair and unbiased. Therefore, the decisions made should be objective and not subjective. Also, an assessment center, we say that it should also give individuals without a traditional academic background the opportunity to demonstrate their skills and abilities. As we learned, we said that there's no direct correlation between academic qualification and the performance of these employees. Therefore, even those employees or candidates who do not have the academic background should be given an opportunity to demonstrate their skills and also abilities of conducting various tasks within the organization. In that case, the assessment should be fair and also should be unbiased. And the assessment center is say that good practice indicates that individuals attending assessment centers should have practical equalities support. For example, assessors should be of mixed gender and where possible of mixed ethnic origins if this is appropriate. In other words, the various diversity variants should be included in the assessment center in terms of the racial background, in terms of gender, in terms of age too, in terms of geographical background, the political affiliations, the religious background, everything. Therefore, one of the practice or the best practice of assessment center is incorporating diversity within the candidates in the assessment center. Also, we say that intellectual skills such as the consideration of the merits and the demerits of other arguments put forward and ability to think clearly at a short notice. Therefore, what is tested here and assessment center is your intellectual capacity, your ability to think fast, your view or attitude towards various arguments. They can be political, religious, racial, etc. And the recruiter is supposed to infer your attitude towards various issues, towards various groups, towards various religions, etc. Also, what should be subjected is a situation of problem solving. It's a situation whereby you bring along a case study, and these candidates are supposed to brainstorm or come up with solution to such problems. Also, attitudes such as political, racial, or religious views may be inferred. In this case, you get to know the views or the attitudes of candidates towards various, or the inclination of these candidates towards various political parties, races, religious, etc. So we say attitudes to authority. Also, you get to know their attitudes to authority or the willingness to take risk. Therefore, all these you can infer them through an assessment center. You are supposed to get the attitude of these candidates, political, racial, religious, attitudes towards authority, etc. The next technique that is used under group selection is the role playing. And they say that role playing, this is where candidates pretend to be actual employees. The candidates pretend to be actual employees in a real decision situation. So in this case, the candidates will act, or they pretend that they are real employees of the organization. They will be subjected to problems or to situations, and they are supposed to show or to demonstrate their ability to perform various tasks in real life experience. Another technique that is used under group selection, we talk about the in-basket. We talk about the in-basket, also referred as the in-tray. And under this technique, we say that the candidate is given a basket piled with memos, phone messages, letters, and other matters of attention. Each person is evaluated in terms of how the tasks are sequenced and how promptly they are accomplished. Therefore, in short, or basically, what is meant by entry is that the candidate is subjected to a lot of activities at the same time. This one can be writing of memos, phone messages, receiving and making calls, all those activities that require the attention of the candidate. And what is evaluated in this case is how this candidate is going to handle all these tasks in terms of priority, and also how promptly this candidate is going to handle all these tasks at the same time. Therefore, under in-basket, what you are supposed to explain is that the candidate is subjected to various tasks such as memos, or writing memos, making phone calls, writing letters, and any other matter that needs the attention of the candidate. And what is evaluated is how the candidate how the candidate will handle the task and how prompt this task will be accomplished. The other technique that is used under group selection is a case study. And they say that a case study is given, but a solution is not provided. Therefore, the candidates are supposed to come up with various solutions to a certain case, and the evaluator will infer their ability maybe to brainstorm and so forth. Next, we talk about the leadership discussion groups. We talk about the leadership discussion groups. These ones are basically meant for top managers or people in the top hierarchy in the organization, and it allows leadership skills and issues to emerge freely. Therefore, emerging issues may be brought forth, and these candidates are supposed to give to form a discussion, they brainstorm various solutions to a certain situation. And what should be noted under LDGs is that this one is mostly done to top managers. Now, why do we have the group discussion as opposed to individual interviewing? There are various reasons as to why we can have the group selection techniques being used as opposed to individual selection techniques. Number one, we say that they give selectors a longer opportunity to study the candidates. What is coming forth is that under this group discussion or the group selection, it can take 2 to 3 or even 4 days. Therefore, the recruiter is in contact with these candidates for a longer period as opposed to a situation whereby he is conducting a face-to-face interview for an individual. Therefore, he is able to get to know more about the candidate as opposed to one-on-one interviews. Therefore, the first purpose of conducting a group discussion or a group selection technique is because the scope is wider, and the recruiter will be able to learn more about the candidate. Secondly, you find that they reveal more than application forms. Interviews or tests, especially investigating problems efficiently. Therefore, much is revealed about a candidate as opposed to the application forms. Remember that application forms may be manipulated. They may not give a clear picture about a candidate. The interviews are so short, and you may not gather enough information about a candidate due to the limited scope of an interview. But as opposed to this discussion, they are longer, the scope is wider, therefore they give a clear picture about a candidate. Also, another purpose or another advantage of using these discussions, group selection, you say that they achieve a measure of comparability or comparability between candidates. Therefore, once you are conducting this group discussion, you are able to compare these candidates in terms of their skills, their competencies, their abilities, etc. Therefore, they provide or they give a better tool of forming comparison between all these candidates. Also, another importance of conducting this one through group selection is the pooled judgment. The pooled judgment of the panel of assessors is likely to be more accurate than the judgment of a single interviewer. In this case, you find that under group selection, we normally have a pool of assessors, and in this case, you find that the judgment that they give is less biased. It is also very objective, as opposed to the judgment that can be given by a single interviewer towards a certain interviewee. When we get back, we shall move on and get to see the legal framework that affect the recruitment and selection. Stay tuned. Welcome back, class. We just move on to the next bit, which is actually the recruitment and the legal framework affecting the selection or the recruitment and selection as general. Therefore, we say that under recruitment, there are various legal compulsions and framework that affect recruitment and selection. There have been various acts that have been repealed since the announcement of the establishment of these acts, and they are going to look just but a few. More importantly, we shall look at the Employment Act and how it affects maybe the recruitment and selection. Also, we shall look at the Equality Act of 2010, which is basically a revision of the previous Discrimination Act and also racial discriminations. So he said that the Equality Act of 2010 is a revision of the previous Discrimination Act, and also there is discrimination. He said the Act is a major revision of the anti-discrimination legislation. Remember, as the bottom line, you are not supposed to discriminate various groups during the recruitment and selection process on the basis of maybe religion, on the basis of sex or gender, on the basis of nationality, geographical background, political affiliation, all those diversities. Therefore, we say that the Act is a major revision of the anti-discrimination legislation. We also talk about the Government Inequalities Office summarizes the changes implemented by the Equality Act as follows. The basic framework of protection against direct and also indirect discrimination, harassment and victimization in service and also public functions, premises and work. Therefore, it protects candidates and also employees against direct and also indirect discrimination, harassment may be even sexual harassment, victimization, when these people are in service or in public functions, in the premises, this is where the employee is working, and at work. We say that removing of definition of gender reassignment by removing the requirement for medical supervision, that is avoid discrimination of female employees, whether they are pregnant or not, as long as their situation does not have a direct impact on the performance of their duties. Also, leveling up protection for people discriminated against. This one can be done through an affirmative action, and this is one is coming up with the solution of those people to problems that have been affecting those people who have been previously being discriminated. These are people maybe with from a minority group, people with a disability, etc. Therefore, you say leveling up protection of those people discriminated against because they are perceived to have or associated with someone who has a protected characteristic, maybe someone living with a disability. So providing new protection for people like careers. Therefore, in short, what you are supposed to know about the legal framework as regard to recruitment and selection is that we have various acts that protect these candidates and also employees. We have the Discrimination Act, we have the Equality Act, we have the Employment Act, and we shall look at others as we shall move on with our subsequent functions under the labor rules. Now, we normally have various factors that you need to consider once you are choosing a method or a selection method. Remember, we have various methods that you can use once you are selecting these candidates. You can opt to use interviews. You can supplement these interviews with testing. You can use group selection. You can do the internal recruitment. You can adopt the internal recruitment techniques or procedures such as promotion, transfers, etc. You can adopt a policy like external recruitment procedures, that is basically the recruitment and selection. Now, we have the various factors that you need to consider once you want to choose or you are choosing a selection method. And these are basically the factors that you are going to go through. Number one, we talk about finding relevant experience. And this we say that relevant work experience is likely the most important factor that influences the human resource selection method. that is the relevant work experience. The relevant work experience required by employer depends largely on the available job position and the level of skills required to carry out the duties of the position. Therefore, in short, what is meant by this statement is that the level of experience that this recruiter or the employer requires will heavily determine the type of technique that this employer will use. We find that human resource personnel initially look at candidates or job candidates' relevant work experience by reviewing their resumes or their CV, and also we find that the applicants without relevant work experience are typically eliminated from the job selection process. Employers desire to hire, or they like to hire candidates with relevant experience because it saves company time and money in training of these employees. Therefore, employers also seek to reduce the employee turnover by hiring qualified applicants. Therefore, the first factor that will determine which technique that will be used in selection is the relevance or the experience of this employee in terms of the work experience. Next factor, we talk about the cost of relocation. This is basically or typically the relocation of this new candidate. It is a consideration that has to be put in mind. And you say that one of the factors that influence the selection process for the human resource department is the geographical location of a candidate. You find that most employees will prefer, or most employers will prefer to hire candidates living within a local area. Most employers will actually prefer to hire these employees who are living within the same locality with the organization. Also, you find that the employers prefer to hire local candidates because it fastens or it hastens the hiring process and it saves the employer money on the interviewing process and on relocation fees. Therefore, it is very easy to hire from the within. Number one, it saves time. It also saves on the costs of this employer maybe being involved in the relocation of this new candidate. And another reason as to why employees or employers will tend to hire from within is to enhance or to ensure that we have the corporate social responsibility of the organization. This is basically giving out to the community that the organization is working with as a token of gratitude. Therefore, in most cases, you find that these organizations will hire those candidates from within the organization. Number one is to hasten or to fasten the hiring process. Number two is to save on cost. And number three is actually to fulfill the requirement of the corporate social responsibility or giving back to the community. Still on that, we say that although most employers look to hire local candidates to save time and money, some employers choose to make the application process open to individuals living in other states. This is to making the recruitment open internationally. And the main reason as to this is actually to create a large pool where you can get the best skills. If local candidates fail to meet the employer's qualification for the job, the HR typically seeks regional candidates next before widening the search to national and global candidates. Therefore, in most cases, if these local candidates do not give or do not yield the requirements of the qualification that the employer is seeking, then the human resource may open up the borders to regional candidates, etc. Therefore, the next another factor that will affect the technique that is used in selection is the cost of relocation of these employees. Number three, we can also talk about the overall cost as a factor that will also affect the choice of the selection method that will be used. And we say that the cost involved in recruitment should be a key factor. It should determine whether to recruit from within or to recruit from outside the organization. The cost of recruitment, in short, will determine whether the organization or the human resource department will adopt internal recruitment or external recruitment. You have to weigh on the cost and evaluate the cost-benefit analysis. Also, we say that recruitment process also count the cost of the employer. That's why organizations try to employ. Recruitment process also count the cost to the employer. That's why organizations try to employ or outsource the source of employment, which will be cost effective to the organization for each candidate. Therefore, under this, what you are supposed to know is that organization, in most cases, they normally outsource those functions which are not key to the organizations. Various functions which are not very important or essential in an organization, they can be outsourced. These are activities that come from time to time. You do not have to keep with such a department or with employees who are not on a full-time basis. And if need arises, you just subcontract or you outsource such services, such as maybe training. The services may be under training, also recruitment, etc. Therefore, the cost is a very important factor once it comes to the choice of the selection technique that will be adopted in an organization. And what you should note is that if a function is not very important or is not key in an organization, you do not have to hire employees. You can basically outsource or subcontract it to a third party, and such functions may include training, selection, marketing functions, etc. Another factor that is considered once we are selecting this technique is the compensation requirements, and they say that the salary requirement of a candidate influence the human resource employment or the selection process. Employers typically set a maximum salary for an open job position, and then in return, the candidates who require a salary greater than what the employer is offering are typically eliminated from the selection process. On the other side, it is also important to note that some companies will choose to negotiate the salary with attractive candidates because they desire to retain their talents and skills. Human resource managers also consider the present salary of a job candidate. If the candidate's current or previous salary is not competitive enough or is too low, you find that an employer may not consider the candidate for the job. Therefore, the compensation requirement is a key factor once it comes to the choice of this selection technique that will be adopted. And under this, we have various factors that will influence the choice of the technique that will be used based on the company policy or the organization policy on compensation. We say that the human resource manager will evaluate the current salary and the previous salary of the employee. If the salary is too low or is not competitive enough, you find that the employer may not consider the candidate for that job. Another factor that you have to look at as a human resource manager is the validity of the technique that you are going to use. Validity basically means the extent to which the selection methods bring about the desired outcome. By definition, validity, we say that it is the extent to which the selection method or technique will bring about the desired outcome. The desired outcome may be based on various factors, maybe the type of candidate that you require in terms of the level of experience, qualification. Also, the number of people you are able to attract with certain skills or from minority groups, the equality, based on the equality, the composition in terms of the diversity, etc. Therefore, the technique that is supposed to be used should be valid, or in other words, it should be a technique that will have a very big degree or high degrees towards achieving a desired outcome, maybe in terms of gender, in terms of the qualification, in terms of the number of applications, etc. Therefore, a test is valid if it measures a specified ability. Another factor that is considered once you are coming up with this technique or the various techniques, you can talk about the industry or area specific education. Under this, we say that educational achievements also play a key role in a company's hiring decision. Some job positions require certain industry knowledge. Some job positions require certain industry knowledge that is often obtained through the completion of a degree program. For instance, a company desiring to hire a registered nurse will most likely require that candidate possess a nursing degree for employment consideration by the Human Resource Department. Also, we find that educational achievement not only acts as a factor in making hiring decisions, but for some employers, the mode of education is also a factor. Some companies prefer to hire candidates who graduated from certain top-ranking institutions, or a company may prefer not to hire candidates who earned degrees through online degree programs. Therefore, based on the industry or the area specific education or the profession that you want to recruit, you can come up with the various selection technique that you are going to adopt. And for a very good example is when a company wants to hire maybe a registered nurse. Maybe we find that a company desiring to hire a registered nurse will most likely require that candidates possess a nursing degree for employment consideration maybe by the Human Resource Department. Another parameter that is used other than the validity and also the industry area is the reliability of the technique. And he said that a test is reliable if it accurately measures a quality and produces the same result when a similar test is repeated again and again. Therefore, once we talk about these techniques, reliability test whether a certain technique will yield the same outcome once the test is conducted again and again. Therefore, a test is reliable if it accurately measures a quality and produces the same result when a similar test is repeated. Therefore, a good selection method should yield both reliability and also validity. It's important you know the difference between reliability and the validity. It's a common question. Under reliability, the test is supposed to yield the same results once it is repeated again and again. But under validity, it is supposed to yield the desired outcome, or this is the degree in which the test will yield the desired outcome. But reliability is the degree to which or in which a test will yield the same results once it is tested again and again. Another factor that is used or that influences the technique that is used is the number of employees needed by the organization. The number of employees needed by the organization. Of course, if the organization needs a large number of applications, then it has to use techniques that will attract a large pool of applications. Another reason is another factor that is considered is the legal compulsion, and it says that the selection technique should be in line with all the prevailing legal conditions and the Employment Act in respect to Employment Act. So, in short, we say that the selection techniques should be in line with the prevailing labor rules or the Employment Act. Different government controls forbidding separation in contracting work have coordinate effect on enlisting practices. Basically, what you just need to note about under the legal compulsion is that the various activities that should be conducted during the recruitment and selection should be in line with the legal provisions of the country. Another factor that should be considered is the organizational policy and the recruitment policy within the organization. Basically, we say that the policy is a principle on how activities will be undertaken within the organization. Therefore, we find that the recruitment policy of the organization, that is the recruiting either recruiting from internal sources or external sources, is affected by the various or the prevailing organizational policies. And it says that the recruitment policy of an organization determines the destination or enlisting, and it gives a structure to usage of recruitment program. You can have various policies affecting the human resource management, and this one specifically regarding to the recruitment and selection. You can have a policy that spells out the various sources where you are going to get your employees from or the candidates from, whether you are going to be adopting the internal sources or the external sources of recruitment, and those policies have to be adhered to. Another factor that is considered, should be considered, is the labor market. You look at the labor market, is where you are going to get these candidates from. You say that the availability of certain skills from the labor market dictates whether to recruit either internally or externally. Also, they say that the availability of manpower, both within and outside the organization, is an essential factor in the recruiting or recruitment process. The labor market affects the demand and supply of human resources. These are the various sources that affect the recruitment. We talk about the demand and supply of human resources. And still under the labor market, remember I said that the labor market, this is where you get your candidates from. We said that the unemployment rate also determines the availability of applicants. So if unemployment rate is high, you find that the number of applications also tend to be high. Also, say that the unemployment rate also determines the availability of applicants. Also, the economic growth rate, that is the national economic growth rate, that is in terms of the GDP. At the point when the organization isn't making new jobs, there's a frequently oversupply of qualified work, which prompts unemployment. Therefore, the various forces that affect the labor market are actually the demand and supply, and something else that should be used as an index is the GDP, or the economic growth of a country, that will directly affect the employment rate. And you should also note that when the unemployment rate is very high, the number of applications also tend to be high, and vice versa. Another factor that should be considered is the urgency to fill a certain position. You talk about the urgency. I say that the urgency to fill a position, will also dictate the recruitment process to adopt, whether to recruit from within, externally, and the techniques to be used to select the candidates. Therefore, if the vacant position is urgent, in most cases you find that the human resource department will adopt internal sources, which are faster and less costly. Another factor that should be considered is the size of the organization. And as this, we say that the size of the organization affects the recruitment process. If the organization is planning to increase its operations and expand its businesses, it will think of hiring more personnel which will handle its operations. Therefore, the size of this organization is also a determining factor on which technique will be used to get these candidates. The last factor that should be considered by the human resource manager is the competitors, or the action of the competitors. And he said that the recruitment policies and procedure of the competitors also affect the recruitment functions of the organization. He said time to time the organization have to change their recruitment policies and the manuals according to the policies followed by the competitors. This is basically so as to have what we call the competitive edge. Recruitment is one of the main departments which place the right candidates to the right job. Therefore, the recruiters should identify the best candidates from different sources and job sites. Recruiters have to identify the problems faced by recruitment and find an alternative to make work efficiently, which can fulfill the recruitment goals on time. Join in the next program or the next class. We shall move on to the next function of human resource management, which is actually the training and development. Thank you.